real open AI, not the open AI that's bantered around, that's not open, would mean that in the sense of kind of an open source software kind of approach, all aspects of the AI was visible in terms of how was the AI trained? What are the models and how are the weightings designed? It's transparent. So I don't need to know all the technical stuff. That's not my skill, but I would like to know where the models are trained. And I would like to be able to think about, how we can move forward with that in terms of attribution and working forward.
Yeah. Well, top of mind for us at the moment has to do with kind of traceability, attribution. The ability to have traceability back into the source, I feel like, is really essential to build the sort of capability for discernment, which is I think a key learning objective for all learners, now 2025 going forward.
But it really is an exchange, right, between content producers and the recipients of those content, and then in between the generator of that, which is AI. Open in the sense that here's content that you can use. The part of that is who created, where it's coming from, and did they give such permission? Fair use and open and licensing of content.
For me, I think the open aspect of AI is actually trying to add an element to AI that makes it more transparent, makes it more humane in a way. I think purely open systems, we kind of know all the way through the system. Right? We know where the data's from. We know how it's being used in an information ecosystem. We know the decisions it's making. We can interrogate the algorithms that it's using and those kind of things. So you can have layers of openness throughout that. And I think
it would be open if it's open source and I can use the API without having to pay for it. It would be open if I could retrain it. But also accessibility. Do most people have the digital literacies and the financial capabilities to retrain something or to redo? Open education includes attribution of your sources. It's not about copyright and paying people. It's about knowing. When we build knowledge, we need to actually know who said this, in what context, and what else did this person say.
One is you should have access to AI. The second meaning of open AI for me is the understanding of what it is you're interacting with, and to really be able to see and understand how it was made, what it was made from, how it chooses what to say. So the algorithms, the transparency of decision making that's going on behind the scenes, the way it's operated and the way it comes to you is also should be open as well.
Is freely available and adaptable. So something that others can adopt and adapt and customize for their purposes. And then community sharing and building on each other's work. So I think the future of OpenAI is largely dependent on developing AI literacy amongst communities and individuals, learn what AI can do in their context and toward their goals.
So to me, it's really, is there opportunity to, genuinely engage with whatever the thing is that we're calling open without necessarily having to navigate a lot of legal barriers or a lot of technological barriers. Some of the tools that are out there do allow for one to be able to download, customize, play with, and use. And I feel like those feel closest to open.
Well, the OpenAI, I think, is you can see the code, you can download the code, you can install it, and so that for me is one aspect of openness. Models behind it should also be open, so and should also be transparent. So it should be clear what data was used in training these models and on what data it is based. So that is also one aspect of OpenAI. The third one is that the models, that you can use it independently of internet. Here you talk about barriers. That's
OpenAI is the practice of having AI publicly accessible to anyone on the planet without certain constraints based on location, country, race, gender, etc. OpenAI could mean an AI technology that anyone could use, and open source is more than that. Yeah, and anyone could use, and then anyone could modify that, contribute to.
Then it's about sharing that system and its constituent parts with others so that they're able to do the things that they need to do and want to do, including, making changes, making adaptations, or we might say revising and remixing, so that those systems work better in their local context. Like, to my mind, the key things are prompts, training data for fine-tuning purposes, as well as weights. I think if we share those and give each other permission to do the things we need to do and do the things we want to do with those, that for me personally, that can be openness. That can be where open education and AI intersect.
Typically, open means two key things. One is that there's free access to the thing, at least in a digital format. And second, that you've got the legal rights to adapt it. So you can make a copy of it, you can make modifications to it, you can adapt the work in some way to make it your own.
That
In the case of
AI should be something that can be used for any purpose. That you can inspect its components across the stack and study how it works, and that you can modify those. Potentially change its output. You could share the outputs with others. You could make it available for modifications for any purpose. These kinds of conditions, I think, would make AI open. But
in open education, open means, the value of equal, the equalness for the opportunity. AI in the open educational context, it can make, more equal, inclusive open education.
So the open practice is really reaching out for including different possibilities and encouraging the kind of open use of AI, trying to identify the openness in using AI as in a way of enhancing or encouraging their creative way of using literally anything. Maybe the content materials or the pedagogical methods or the strategies they are learning about. So this is how I define open AI, as in a way of, again, as a facilitator, but much more incorporating or encouraging students' own participation or critical thinking. Yes.
If these are based on open data, I think that's fundamental. For me personally, because in open education, we talk a lot about enabling. It's about enabling ideas to travel, to share in a respectful way. And that means acknowledging where the ideas come from, sharing what you do in your practice, connecting with what others are doing, and valuing that actually diverse voices matter. They bring different perspectives.
As we think about AI and education and sort of the openness, the things that I'd like to be open is I'd like to be opening up questions of what is the research agenda that we need to be looking at? What are the questions that we need to be answering? I mean, just in plain language, what questions do we have about what AI can do in the context of teaching and learning? And so effectively, there's a need to identify how do we get more voices at the very front of the conversation about even framing the questions that we should be asking.
Effective regulation and open training data, clear transparency there. I would say regulation about the types of things that AI cannot be used for, right? Public AI, right, would be an interesting approach. So instead of individual companies, right, so have it a public utility. So government-run servers, government-run training data, actually open, where they give away their information and their models and their training data and all of that. This is a public good. We need this, but we don't want to see the profit motive introduced. We want to see it run for the public good.
But I think there has to be an element of equity for there to be true openness. which is really about, who are the people who have the power to contribute to the creation and dissemination of knowledge. Who is included and excluded from these conversations with relation to AI, whether it's the ethics of the algorithmic biases in the data sets, the ethics of the theft of content, that the content that has been scraped for these large language models without the consent of the individuals who created that content. There's ethics regarding the exploitation of labour of people who, frequently in the global majority, who are responsible for cleaning the data in the large language models. And the big elephant in the room with any discussion about AI, of course, is the environmental cost of it. And you can argue, is there any way to use these systems ethically when they have such a catastrophic environmental impact?
If I take my understanding that openness in education is access to knowledge, what I would think about is how can AI help or support the goal of wider access to knowledge in the context of education? What would it make possible, and for whom? It also brings a vision first, not the AI. Conundrum with openness in AI in general, and maybe that extends to education too, is which components of AI are open? Is it the dataset that's open? Is it the model that's open? Is it the model parameters that are open? So there's different layers of openness.
Kind of an open sharing kind of mindset, democratization of representation. We're talking about democratization of access. I don't think openness is just about the availability for tools to be used. I think it's about the understanding and the transparency of how the tools are being managed, maintained, appropriately monitored, and also trained. So there's the data sets, there's the system, there's the practices. And I think if we separate out the level of openness and accept that there are different definitions of openness across those three very generalized areas, what do we mean by openness in data? What do we mean by openness in the systems? And what do we mean by openness in the end user perspective?
There's a few different things. It's accessible. And that could be in a variety of ways, including cost, not behind a paywall in any way. It is easily findable. We can share it with other people. A big part of with open is we can modify it to, in particular, meet our local needs. We can then share our modified version. That equity part of it is important as well. And so I don't just see open as, the access part. It's also about doing it in a way that does no harm, that is about equity. And transparency is another part of it, because where did the materials come from is another important part of open, because we need to be able to say what your sources were for a lot of reasons. One, because they deserve the credit and the gratitude, but also so that we can understand the reliability of the sources that we're using. And for me, it has to be all three, because if you do access without the doing no harm and the transparency, then you're absolutely risking further colonization in a lot of ways.
And the most open level, you need, the resource, the technology, the people and the process, the technology and the processes at least, being, openly available, which means other people can learn about these artifacts. They can learn the know-how and understand it with the information that is publicized. And they also have capabilities to reuse and adapt them, repurpose them, different aspects of, different verticals of information that could be uncovered, that could be closed, which would make the different levels. So I think it would be more like a radar plot rather than a unidimensional, way of looking at it, where you have different levels of openness that works for different stakeholders. Being open in, unconditionally in specific verticals.
Okay, I think the thing that for me is the thread that runs through all this is agency. It's having some sense of sovereignty, some sense of self-determination, some sense of choice, some ability to shape the world in ways that are appropriate and relevant. for me, it comes back to that bigger purpose. Like a healthy society is a society in which people can participate.